Hello everybody and welcome to our panel on cybersecurity in remote working environments. My name is Ally and I am the Enterprise Risk, Security, and Compliance Professional at Critical Ops. I am here with Karen, who is our creative developer. With us we have 3 of our interns that we have been working with this semester. I'd like to start our panel by asking everybody to introduce themselves. Adjua, could you please start us off?
Yes, good morning. My name is Adjua Blake, and I attend the university at Albany in Albany, New York. And my major is cybersecurity with a minor in informatics.
Thanks for joining us, Adjua. Could you please talk a little bit more about what you are researching with us this semester?
Well, I'm studying different vulnerabilities that remote workers need to be aware of and be cautious when they're working from home or working in a cafe, library, even in your own car.
That's very relevant with the amount of companies that were displaced by COVID and sent their employees home to work.
Yes.
Richie, could you please introduce yourself next?
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm a student at the University at Albany as well, and right now I'm studying cybersecurity as a major and a minor in informatics. And with my time at Critical Ops, I'm also focusing in the area of cyber hygiene and compliance. And in that area specifically, I'm looking at how the switch to remote work has impacted small to medium-sized businesses and what we can do about that.
Thanks, Richie. And lastly, Tyler, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I can. So I'm Tyler. I'm a junior at UAlbany. I'm a dual major of digital forensics and informatics with working on a minor in theater. At Critical Ops, I'm studying CMMC compliance in an external network and at one point an Office 365 network. It's been a great time so far.
Adjua, you mentioned that you're studying the different vulnerabilities that companies might face when having their employees work from home. In your research, what vulnerabilities did you find?
Well, there's several vulnerabilities, but the real ones that we should be also looking out on are malware, phishing attacks, weak passwords, unpatched security vulnerabilities, hidden backdoor programs, super user or admin account privileges, the implementation of cybersecurity measures by employees or users, and most importantly, public Wi-Fi.
I like that you mentioned public Wi-Fi. I've read a lot lately about how public Wi-Fi can be dangerous for companies with sensitive data. What would happen if these vulnerabilities were exploited?
Well, for example, with public Wi-Fi, hackers can position themselves in between the user and the connection point of the Wi-Fi, which then they can distribute malware and implant infected software on the computer. With weak passwords as well, you can't use like dictionary words. Don't repeat letters or replace letters with numbers. Don't use your personal information. And then most importantly, do not write your passwords down or store it near your computer because it can be easily cracked.
I've been thinking a lot about shared devices as well with cybersecurity. We like to think that we can trust the people around us, and we probably can, but we also have to think very carefully about who has access around us. Should we be concerned about other people in the home?
Yes, and they could probably download a software or program, which then let that attacker have access to your computer without your knowledge. And when they do that, they could take your stuff and expose it and put you and your company in harms.
That's a great point. I've seen that shared devices may pose a risk when there are children around. They might go to a website to download a video game, but not realize that the web page isn't legitimate. Do you think that parents should be educating their children about cybersecurity too?
I think everyone should be educating them on themselves on cybersecurity because it's really important. We like you said, kids like to play video games. They also like to watch videos, and they're on different sites that's always not secure. And sometimes these hackers trick users into thinking that the site that they on is legitimate when it's actually not. And they go on the site and they give them their personal information or any kind of information, and it'll be too late by that time. So everybody should be educated in this field, from oldest to youngest, everyone.
I'd like to move over to Richie because he is studying some of the solutions businesses can take right now. Richie, what solutions should businesses be focused on to prevent some of these vulnerabilities that Adjua has been talking about?
Well, that's a great question, Ally. As I was listening to Adjua, it can sound like there's always an attack looming, which is very true. And it's very hard to prevent an attack in a lot of scenarios. There's almost 100% guarantee that an attack will happen at some point, but we can mitigate the risks like significantly. And in my research, I looked at back to the basics was my concept to kind of describe how to prevent a lot of these things. And it's very simple. If companies would just go back to basic cyber hygiene in a lot of areas, they'd see statistics go down in terms of their likelihood of an attack. So some of these things could be installing a network firewall, using antivirus, using a VPN for encryption. That would definitely help on public Wi-Fi. Backing up regularly. Some strategies that I've heard are the 3-2-1 backup strategy, where you keep 3 copies of each important file, 2 on a different external hard drive, and 1 in the cloud, which might seem like a lot, but it's definitely worth it. And it's shown to do great things in terms of keeping your data secure and having extra. Using strong passwords and using multi-factor authentication is one of those very important foundational steps. Patching your devices regularly and securing your routers, and least of all, but very important, locking your devices, which kind of goes into having your kids around. If they get into your personal device, they can kind of mess with it, and you want to keep that separate from home life.
That's a great point. Have you seen any trends lately about how the pandemic has influenced cybercrime?
Well, one of the most startling ones to me when I was reading it was recently the FBI reported that the number of complaints about cyber attacks, their cyber division specifically, has been up to 4,000 a day. And that's what they say as 400% increase from what they were seeing prior to the coronavirus. So it's like remote workers are being targeted like no tomorrow. And that's why these principles and these foundational cyber hygiene steps are very important for them to take.
When it comes to cybercrime, what types of attacks have increased? Is it phishing, malware, ransomware, or other types of attacks?
They're a mix. They're a mix of attacks, from ransomware to malware to phishing is a very common one. And a lot of the times, what I've noticed in my research is attackers go for the lowest hanging fruit. So when you do implement these principles and you have defense in depth, which is multiple layers of defense, a lot of the times they're not going to go for the more defended person. You know, they're not going to take the time to do that. They want to get the quick hit. They want someone who's just going to click a link. So phishing tends to be the most targeted that I've seen, but there's other avenues, like I said, ransomware, cross-site scripting, things along those lines.
That kind of goes back to what Adjua was saying regarding education.
Mm.
So with all of this, should organizations be beefing up their cybersecurity training for employees too?
Without a doubt. I think one of the statistics that made me think about the importance of training was that since the pandemic, 73% of workers have not received any IT security awareness training from their employers. And the reason that's so important is because they weren't really getting trained as much as they should be prior to this, but there's new threats working from home. And companies should really take the time to educate their workers on those threats. And the change in, like, one statistic had to do with phishing. And companies, when they did train their employees on phishing, they saw them being way more prepared and so many cyber attacks being mitigated because of this. So I just think when you educate, even like Adjua was saying, when you educate your children on it, when we just educate the people as a whole and let them know, hey, this is what you should be doing, it really makes a difference.
Tyler, your internship has been very focused on the technical aspects of cybersecurity and some of the new compliance standards. What should businesses do if these vulnerabilities are exploited?
So it almost feels inevitable in this day and age that something will eventually be exploited. So these following things the business should do sort of simultaneously if the staffing exists for it. So first, they should follow any of their current policies to stop operations that could be affected by the vulnerability, whether that's like removing their network from the internet, taking down access to certain pages of a website, or removing access from certain employees that they feel like might be the method of the hacker accessing their network. They should assess where the exploit has affected, like how did it get in, what is it currently affecting, is it stopped affecting, and did we lack security, or did we have a problem with our current lineup, or did we just miss this entire idea of where security should be for this sector? They should contact law enforcement because cyber crimes are still crimes and law enforcement might be able to help, as well as anyone affected by it, which could be people in a contract where if it was sensitive material, you now need to let them know that there was a breach and their contract material could be out. Employees, where if it was employee information or employee passwords, you could let them know that, hey, this has happened. I'm sorry that your information was leaked, but here's what we can go about it. Or, hey, your password seems like it might have been the one breached. You have to go through this, changing it, make sure you follow the password protocols. And customers, because transparency is very important. If there's a breach, you might as well inform the customers ahead of time because eventually it will get out and that can lose trust in business or cost more in the long run through lawsuits. They should also reboot to backups in order to not be working on a corrupted state. Like if they have backups, they can go back to then. They'll know that at this point, nothing was corrupted, nothing was breached, and we can look at it from a clean slate here and see how to fix it to prevent those acts in the future.
I like that you mentioned backups. Could you talk a little bit about some of the best practices with backups? Richie gave the 3-2-1 rule. What are other security experts recommending right now?
So through new compliance standards, it never says exactly which way you have to back things up, but the recommendations usually fall of like backing up something multiple times, whether it's a physical backup, a cloud backup, and another cloud backup, or a physical backup on premise, off premise, and the cloud backup. It always suggests that you back up things multiple times. So personally, there's many different ways you can go about it, but my recommendation, as well as what's followed by a majority of businesses, they use hybrid cloud. They'll determine what information is critical to the business, and they'll store that on private cloud, as well as possibly physical backups held with the individuals who need them just in case. And then things that are not critical to business or not contracted information that would be bad if it got out, but not be as detrimental, they'd store on public cloud. This hybrid cloud does provide the security needed for the private critical information while cutting costs by letting some of the information stay on public cloud, so businesses aren't spending too much on infrastructure but still having all the security they need. And if then ransomware was to occur, they'd be able to either go to their backups and say, all right, delete it, or they'd be able to use the security in the private side to not have to worry about getting an attack of ransomware in the first place.
Do backups really make a difference with attacks such as ransomware? Like, what could they allow us to do should a company get hit with ransomware?
Yeah, most definitely, because if you have something stored on one device and a ransomware attack comes through and they say, hey, we have control of this device and we're going to delete everything from this device if you don't pay 700 Bitcoins to this address in 12 hours. But if you have a backup of that device and all the information on it, you could just not. You could either call their bluff and see if they'll just stop, or you can just not pay it. And if they delete all the information, you got the backup and you don't even have to worry about it.
What would you recommend to organizations that forget about backups? Are there such things as auto backups?
There is auto backup programs that'll back things up fully once a week and then do incremental backups on every other day that back it up to just the things that were implemented that day. Those are very useful, but they have to be made sure that you check upon them, that they're not like backing up information that's not necessary or just not running. So with anything that's automated, you just got to make sure you're continuously checking on it every like once a week, or at least like once regularly, in order to make sure that your backups are actually being stored. And this is where it goes in the importance of testing your backups, where if you have backups, that's all great, but if you don't test them, maybe they're corrupted themselves. And if you then have a corrupted backup, you don't know how much information you're going to lose or what backup you have last that's up to organizational standards.
So we are about out of time for today's panel discussion. I'd like to thank our interns Adjua, Richie, and Tyler for participating in the panel and talking about what they've been learning this semester. I'd also like to thank all of our viewers for listening in on our panel. If you have any cybersecurity questions or would like to hear about receiving a free cybersecurity compliance consultation, you can contact me. My name is Ally, and my email address is ally, A-L-L-Y, @criticalops.com, or you can visit www.criticalops.com. Thank you.